Anyway, great to be here, Connie. Thanks for hosting this, and thanks for everybody for coming. It's great. And it's great that it is joint with Our Revolution and Dems Abroad. So actually, I came prepared to talk about three things. You've already heard a little bit about all three. So I will talk for a few minutes, and then the more conversation we can have together, the better, because this is an organizing time, not so much a lecturing time. So you'll be glad I'm not Bernie. His average talk is an hour and 20 minutes. and actually, Bernie's in Puerto Rico, and at least he was supposed to be there. I took off for 5 days, so I haven't paid as much attention. But and then he's going to be in Toronto. He's giving a lecture Sunday, and the Toronto Democrats Abroad and Our Revolution people will be there as well. So I think the more we work together, the better, particularly given the nature of both groups' huge overlap. I want to give a shout out to my friends over here, Rick and Sandra. That's where I'm staying. Give them a wave. And they're both labor activists from the U.S. and Sandra globally, and they live here part of the time. So thanks to you guys. I'm here. Anyway, so yeah, I was going to talk about three things. So, encouraged to talk a lot about the Democratic Party and how you change it. So that's one. Secondly, Medicare for All, which you just heard a lot about. So I'll probably cut back on that one. But what we can do about it here, because actually the main thing I would say is these stories need to go to the 29 Democratic senators who did not co-sponsor Bernie's bill. So 16 did, and 31 didn't. 32 didn't. I'm going to get these numbers right. I'm obsessed with the right numbers, by the way. So 32. So depending on where you're from in the States, like my friend Sherrod Brown didn't co-endorse, believe it or not.
Why not?
So I don't know, but we'll come back to Sherrod. We should still vote for Sherrod compared to who he's running against. It's not a close call. Anyway, the Unity Reform Commission, it's the two words. We want to always remember it's unity based on change, not just unity for the sake of unity. We need to change. We need to unify. We need to do both. So that's what it's named, Medicare for All. And then I was going to talk some about, how we're organizing, whether it's here or in the States, and the ways in which we're organizing, which includes what I call party transformation. There are 57 parties, as you know. You're one of the 57. DC is one of them. That's why they're not 50. Puerto Rico is one. Guam is one. There's 57. And so there actually is a path. And again, you have the advantage here of being, most of you anyway, eligible to be involved in one of the others, not just in this one. It could be one of the 50 states. It could be Guam, for that matter. But you're eligible to be involved in one of the others. So that change is really important. Running candidates at the local level, not just for Congress, is really critical. That's how we get change. We don't get change just by saying, here's the Democrat, here's the Republican, here's the other parties, now I pick. So my belief, and this is very implicit in Our Revolution and many other groups, is we have to get involved in that. Not targeting as much as a forward positive program for change. And then the third thing is issues, and Medicare for All is probably one of the great examples of an issue that will mobilize millions of people. There's lots of issues. So overall, what I like to say is we can't just be on defense. Resistance, that shirt, is really key. But if we actually want to win, so in the Bernie campaign, I used to say all the time when I spoke, we have to believe that we can win. We have to believe that that kind of transformation is really possible in America. We have to believe that as progressive people, that our vision, that we can win, not just that we can resist, but that we can win. And so even more now, I believe that's the key strategy, because if you think about the states that we lost, Hillary Clinton won that election by 3 million votes. Another one of our issues is national popular vote. People are interested. I can explain that. You do not need a constitutional amendment. It's halfway there already without a constitutional amendment. It's work in each state. I can go into the math. It takes about 5 minutes, but if you want it, you'll get it. Right this minute. I'll come back to it. I promise. Just say national popular vote, and I'll come back to it. But anyway, but obviously until that point, and the Republicans can block that because they control too many of the states, so we actually can't get there unless people in states like Arizona or Oklahoma say, hey, our voices are never heard in a presidential election. We think we should go to national popular vote as well. But anyway, until then, these states matter a lot. And so a lot of what I start from is that we need change in the states. And again, we do that really in those three ways. We organize around issues, not just national issues, but local issues. Could be about rent, big issue here. Could be about land use, that's a big issue here. Could be state issues. There's things you can do in the states, obviously. Most of the states Republicans control, but some of them they don't. And even the ones they do, it turns out you can pass things in referenda votes, ballot measures, like raise the minimum wage. So you can do issues in the states, local issues, and of course, national issues. And on national issues, except for the resistance, which is key right now, whether it's taxes, whether it's the Affordable Care Act, we could go on and on. There's a huge number of, quote, resistance issues, some of which we've lost already, and others we've won, at least temporarily, right? I mean, from my point of view, we didn't need to increase the defense budget by $70 billion. And most Democrats voted for that as well, by the way. So, that's my point of view. We don't have to agree on everything here. But so let's think about not just fighting Trump, at least for this few minutes, but what kind of nation do we actually want? What is it that we want to organize around, whether we're living here or we're living there, and how do we get there? And so we're thinking for positive change, not just the resistance. And part of that is we're not going to win in those states, particularly, unless we have a vision for change, because that's what the trap we got in to some extent. And obviously, I voted for Clinton, and probably almost everybody here did. But the problem in those states was a huge drop of participation, and also barriers to voting rights. And that's a whole nother piece of this mission that we have to be on, is what I call voters in and money out. Voters in and money out. And there's a huge effort in the U.S. to do that. I'm also heavily involved in that, but I have to circle back to that later. But democracy movement itself, which is, sort of painful to think about, that in this old democracy, the structure itself of it, particularly voting rights and the role that money plays, are way off compared to any other country in the world. Again, a lot of international experts here, so I'll shy away from international subjects. But so let me start with the Democratic Party and this Unity Reform Commission and sort of how that operates. Kind of asked me to really focus on that. And so I'll start there. So the Unity Reform Commission came out of the convention in Philadelphia. Several of you were there. We had intended, so I was a, quote, senior advisor. I don't like to be senior to Bernie, actually. I'm not, number one, and number two, I didn't really like that title, but in the campaign, I worked, so I'd been president of Communication Workers of America, the National Union, actually international Canadian members, for 10 years, and decided not to run again, not because of Bernie, I want to add, but it ended up a little differently, because that's where I worked with Rick. We worked together for years. He was a senior organizer at CWA, did amazing work. And he hates me talking about him. So that's it, Rick. I won't talk about it, I promise. But anyway, I come to believe that, for me anyway, 10 years was enough as president. It was 39 years in the union. It was my whole adult life, really. And that I wanted to go back into, as I said to the shop stewards in a letter, back to the streets, building a mass movement. And so that was like 6 months before the term ended. And this is just to say that I knew Bernie 25 years. And so I said to Bernie, okay, when the term ends, I'll volunteer. So the volunteering was a joke. It was supposed to be 10 hours a week. And that didn't work out. So anyway, many people here were somewhat involved in the campaign. So one of the premises, so I've been on the Democratic National Committee this is the 13th year coming up. And that's also a long time for that, by the way. And so when I announced for Bernie, which was in the summer of June of 2015, I also said, I'm a superdelegate, the first one for Bernie beside himself. And we need to end superdelegates. That was like a premise I had of the campaign. Yeah. Not as delegates, but the idea that somehow we were, because there were 715. Yeah. And so before the Iowa caucus even met, you saw the numbers flash up. Yeah. Bernie has 4. It was like me and 3 other people and Hillary. And again, this is not an anti-Hillary thing. We're looking through the windshield, and she became our candidate. But I'm just explaining how we got the Union Reform Commission. So in any case, that superdelegate issue was a huge issue in the campaign because of the numbers flashing up before Iowa. Looked like he couldn't win before the thing even started. And there were other things about the rules of the party, which, again, we can go into more depending on what people want to hear about. But so Trump gets nominated. Philadelphia convention's a week later. Trump's nominated in Cleveland. And Bernie decided that he was willing to negotiate going to the floor on these items and also on other items that I happen to care deeply about, by the way, like the Trans-Pacific Partnership and other issues that were a really big deal to me and others. And basically negotiated out all the issues. So skip the other issues for now, like Medicare for All. That was one of them we might have gone to the floor on. On the rules issues, he made an agreement. Because of him, we made an agreement that said we won't go to the floor. We'll agree to this commission. Now, commissions existed before, and they're just a way to bury things. So what's unique about this one is that, so I was named as the vice chair. That's unique because I hadn't been the vice chair before. That's really, no, I'm kidding. What was unique about this one is that everything that comes out of it goes to the DNC itself for a vote. That's number one. Can't get buried in the Rules Committee. Oh, that's a big concern because it will go to the Rules Committee of the party, where we have basically no one from our team is on there. That's one of the things that came out last week that was not positive. But it will go to the full DNC. And more importantly, in the resolution that was adopted unanimously in Philadelphia, it says that we have to implement it, meaning this commission. And the commission is 21 people. So me plus 7 came from Bernie. The chair plus 9 came from the Clinton campaign. And 3 came from the chair. The chair didn't exist at the time. The chair became Tom Perez. So you don't have to do a lot of fancy arithmetic to realize there's 21. So it's me plus 7. We got to convince other people or we're not going to get anything out of there. So that might not be too cheerful, except I'm going to tell you that I have a positive view of this. But more importantly, in the resolution itself, it says that 2/3 of the DNC members, they become the superdelegates, will be apportioned based on how people vote or caucus in the 57 primaries and caucuses that occur. And will not have their own, they can campaign for whoever they want, but they won't be able to vote in that way. Their vote will be apportioned based on how the people vote. So this is a radical change in the party. That was passed unanimously at the convention. So we're going to be reminding the DNC members of that because some of them would love to change that, frankly. Most of them, I think, agree. Well, that was done in Philadelphia. That's the highest body of the Democratic Party. Some of them may now believe that's the right thing. I'm not saying that they all do. But that is definitely going to come out of this Union Reform Commission. So the Union Reform Commission, as Connie said, it's 21 people. I told you how they break down, 8, 10, and 3. And been meeting since May. And actually, beside the public meetings, broken into 4 subgroups. One group is on caucuses, how caucuses work. I'm very optimistic that out of that group, and then our 21 is going to come transparency in caucuses. Again, this is deep into the weeds, but the Iowa caucus, for example, there was never a head count of how many people caucused for this one or that one. Again, we're looking forward. So obviously that gave me a lot of heartburn at the time because it was basically 50-50 and there was no count. So you couldn't argue, wait a minute, there are 1,666 caucuses in Iowa. And there's no count of the people themselves. There's only a count of the delegates that go to the county convention that come out of each one of the caucuses. So we're going to say that there needs to be a head count. We're going to say that people who can't get there will have a way to vote absentee ballot. So lots of working people or people that are disabled in some way can't get to, the firehouse or the school gymnasium or somebody's living room. This would have actually been a mid-sized caucus in Iowa. 65 people is a good size for a caucus. A lot of them were smaller. Anyway, a lot of people couldn't get there. It's a Monday night at 7 o'clock. And so it's not just Iowa. This will come out for all caucus states. So it's changing how many caucus states there'll be, but there'll be at least 15 caucus states. So way more transparency, way more openness. That's caucuses. Primaries. There's huge problems with primaries. Anybody here from New York? Anybody know for next September's gubernatorial and legislative primary, if you're now one of 2.6 million independents, when can you register to vote in that primary?
Too late.
Too late. October 13th was the deadline, Friday the 13th, to register to change from being independent. 2.6 million people. So I guess we don't want them involved, right? 2.6 million people. October 13th, they had to change their registration to Democrat to vote in a primary that's September 11th of next year.
If you're already registered as a Democrat,
You're fine.
you're okay. If you were last year.
Yeah, you're fine. But again, most people would argue that one of the things you do, it's called party building. It's not called party freezing. It's called party building. And of the 2.6 million independents in New York, a huge number are young. Lots of young people. They don't rush to register in a party. They go, oh, I should vote. Okay, I'm going to go register. And then they say, oh, I don't have a party. Right? Well, you're supposed to. So our job, right, all of us here, is to get them in. Well, it's already too late. And there's huge issues next year. They're electing a governor. Again, I don't want to get into the weeds too much. Lots of stuff about him, if you're reading the paper about New York. But more importantly, there are 8 Senate Democrats. And the main thing I would have against my friend Andrew, I don't know him that well, he's not really my friend, but I do know him, is that he goes along with this. 8 Senate Democrats in New York caucus with the Republicans. And that prevents the Democrats from having majority. And this is a really big deal because this is one of the states where you have a Democratic governor, you have an overwhelming majority in the assembly, they pass great stuff, and you can't pass it in the Senate because they're caucusing with the Republicans, and on most things, they won't agree to go with the Democrats in the Senate. So this is our revolution, and many other groups are going to take aim. Most of them are in New York City. It's even more amazing. So here's New York City with, I call it one of the most progressive city councils in the world. That's saying a lot. But I mean, it's right up there in the world, but definitely in the United States. And that's because there's a small donor match in New York City. For every dollar you give, up to $150, there's a $6 match of city money. That helps elect a regular people like us can go and run there. And that's what the city council looks like there. Anyway, back to the problem. So that's a good thing. New York City, small donor match. We're trying to get that all over the country. Chicago right now, more likely Cook County, Illinois, a bunch of counties in Maryland. LA has a version of it. It's a real way around. What do you do about this giant amount of money pouring in? $7 billion was spent in the election last year. It's a worldwide record. $7 billion. That's the total amount. Total amount. So again, for younger people particularly, they're saying, how do I get involved? What does this mean to me? I mean, there's probably a lot of us here, whether we're younger or not, thinking that, but definitely younger people think this all the time. So that's the point on this New York primary situation. And it's the part on, it's not just caucuses. It's well known they have issues. Primaries have issues too. So the New York Board of Elections, which are actually decent people, they admitted 2 days ago that they purged 200,000 voters in the Democratic presidential primary in 2016. 200,000, mostly from Brooklyn. Yeah, 200,000. But more importantly, I don't know if it's more importantly, as importantly, the deadline that year was October 20th to register as a Democrat to vote in a May primary. And so, again, just imagine particularly younger people, they're voting, they registered independent, then they find out they can't vote. That's in addition to the 200,000. So I harp on New York because, number one, I don't know if Connie sat through all of that, but we had an hour at the 4th meeting in Las Vegas, public meeting, with the director of the New York Board of Elections.
I saw that. That was shocking.
Yeah, and it's all, if you don't believe me, you can go and watch it. The DNC, a few days later, it's still not up, but they will put that whole video up online. And he was decent. He said, this isn't so good. You might be able to fix it this way. And, to be honest, he's appointed by the governor. He said this openly. And, so the Unity Reform Commission, 1, caucuses, 2, primaries, 3, superdelegates. So we divided people up. There's 4 groups. Superdelegates, and that I already talked about. The mechanisms that we're going to use about how you deal with the roughly, it's roughly 450 DNC members who they can campaign for whoever they want, but their vote's going to be tied to mostly to their states. And for some of us who are at large or come from, there's 39 people that are on there a different way. it'll be tied to, in all likelihood, how the whole country votes will be apportioned that way. So like I'm not on there from DC. I'm on there because supposedly I was a labor activist. So anyway, the fourth one is the one we will not get that far on. It's, number one, it's the hardest one. It's called party reform. How do you change the party itself? And so that doesn't, often when people think of the Democratic Party, they think of, the building and the people in there and the chair on South Capitol Street in DC. I like to get people to think about it the other way around. These 57 parties, particularly the ones in the 50 states, because that's actually where you change things, from my point of view. And a number of those parties have already changed dramatically in the last few years as more people, not just younger, but progressive people have gotten involved. It's been a deliberate thing. One of the things our revolution has done is we've helped get over 10,000 people in vacant seats, almost all of them, to become precinct chairs, precinct captains. Because, there's 3,000 counties in America. This party has had no existence in most of them for years. And more dramatic even than the presidency is that from 2009 to 2017, there was a loss of 1,100 state legislative seats. It's not just 20 governors or whatever the number is exactly. It wasn't a net loss of 20 either. But it's not just the governors, it's 1,100 state legislative seats. And so that has a huge impact on the Congress because, as you know, every 10 years, there's a reapportionment based on the census. And those state legislatures and their governor are the ones who do that. So, all right, so that's a lot about the Union Reform Commission. And again, glad to answer questions on that. So it ends, December 8th and 9th, the 5th public meeting in DC, there'll be a vote on all those things I talked, on any outcome. So any of the 21 could put something into the hopper, particularly the group they were in, the 4 groups. And those things will come to a vote December 8th and 9th. It'll be public. It won't be, somebody will live stream it. The DNC doesn't live stream. Don't ask me to explain this. They video it, and then 4 days later, they post it. So I don't know the reason for that, and I don't care that much. I got enough issues here. But there'll be a vote, and then by December 31st, those votes will be in a report, and it'll be public, and that will be online at DNC or Democrats.org. There's a tile there, Union Reform Commission, and you'll be able to. Those of you who have trouble sleeping at night, print the whole thing out. It's guaranteed to work better than any pill. And then it goes to the Rules Committee. But as I said, anything the Rules Committee doesn't support anyway will go to the next meeting. A certain number of months will go by. But sometime in 2018, the DNC itself will vote on every one of these points, either by bundling them up and saying yes, which is the way they used to do everything. There's never any debate. Now there is debate sometimes, or one by one on the ones that are more controversial. So that's that. So Medicare for all. I'm just going to say a couple of things. The number one thing would be, and I'm happy to answer questions. I knew there was something about this for lots of reasons, and I've worked with Bernie on that bill, and it's not perfect. And part of the reason it's the way it is we wanted it to be inclusive. So there was a lot of discussion with the 16 senators who co-sponsored it with him and their staff. So there's things that aren't there, but overwhelmingly we should look at the things that are there for the first time and realize that will never get to the floor of the U.S. Senate at the earliest before 2021. So that's 4 years to organize around this. And having been through this, I supported Barack Obama, worked a lot on that healthcare bill, and so it gets, I don't know which word I want to use here, but, down to what we got, the Affordable Care Act. The House bill was like way, way, way better. And if we don't build a mass movement, this is my words, a popular movement is a better word, in America for real change, we're not going to get Medicare for all. It's good policy is great, but we don't get things because they're good policy. This is going to take, in my view, a landslide election, and particularly in 2020, to give us a chance to pass that in 2021. Because as you all know, unless they change the rules, and that's another topic, you need 60 senators. You actually don't, as you could watch the Republicans maneuver the system. We could not get Harry Reid to do that on the healthcare bill. They did it right away, didn't they? And again, I'm not really here to criticize Harry Reid, although I was certainly jumping up and down at the time over that and Employee Free Choice Act, which was a major labor law reform. They did it in a way where it required 60. We had 58, 59. We probably had 60 for about 10 minutes and couldn't get it on the floor. So the point is that wherever we live, this is going to take building a huge popular movement. I don't use the word populist as much. It's a loaded word, but popular. And in our case of millions and millions of people, and it really does have to be in all 50 states. It particularly has to be in the center of the country. If we didn't learn that, we're not going to win otherwise. We have to excite people. We have to, turn the turnout way up. Our revolution is very active. A guy named Jim Hightower is a key leader of it in Texas. And many of you have heard of Jim Hightower. He was the last person to get elected as a Democrat statewide in Texas. And what he says is Texas isn't a red state, it's a low turnout state. 26% of eligible voters voted in Texas last year in the November 8th election. 26%. Now that's his number. I didn't check it, but I believe it. We have to think about places like Texas. Why is it we can't win in Texas? Now, if he was here, he'd say, of course we're going to win in Texas. And he'll tell you exactly how, county by county, and what they're doing. And not just our revolution, but other groups, and the Democratic Party is changing there. So, I think that's the way we have to think about stuff. And Medicare for All is a good issue to do that in. And the stories that you're collecting are going to collect together here, I think is really, really key. Because we can all use that. Most Americans don't understand that, number one, the VA is a single payer system. So everybody's patriotic. And, my father was in the Army for a long time and stuff. But, and he loved the VA, got a couple of years ago. Loved the VA care. That's a single payer system. And so, it's ironic because you have the American Legion, all kinds of groups fighting for the VA because VA is under attack right now. And that is a single payer system. But Democrats abroad has examples from all over the world about not only how it works, but as my friend Bernie likes to say, way less money. Because the 26% of our 4.4 trillion on healthcare that goes for administration in these single payer countries, I don't know what it is in France. It's really low, like 3-4%. Medicare is 5%. What is it in France?
1 to 3% in all of Europe for administrative costs.
Okay, good. Thank you. But that's stunning. 1 to 3% versus 20+%. And we're talking about 20+% of $4.4 trillion. So that alone, and one of the criticisms that even in the Democratic caucus of Medicare for All, how are we going to pay for it? Well, there goes a huge percentage right off the bat, right? The second one is that it's in this bill. We're going to negotiate with the pharma companies.
Right.
That's estimated to save over $250 billion a year out of $4.4 trillion. Number three is one of the paid fors that's likely, and this was in the House bill passed in 2009, is to increase the payroll tax on employers. So right now, all the public employers, including the federal government, I don't know all, but virtually all, and many large employers, and almost all union employers, which is only 10% of the country at this point, but are paying 20% of payroll on healthcare. 20% of payroll. The House bill that passed in 2009 had an 8% additional payroll tax. Medicare is 1.75. 8% additional payroll tax for employers that didn't provide healthcare basically at the sort of Medicare level at the time. So if we put that 8% back in on all employers, the ones that do provide healthcare are going to save a huge amount of money, like 12% of payroll. And the ones that don't are going to pay for it, and they should be paying. And that's an easy way. That plus the pharma, plus the savings on administrative costs, and you're all but done, frankly. And there is on Bernie's website, there's a 5-page paper on how to pay for it. It's got these ideas in it and a bunch of others. It's not in the bill itself. So having said that, it's going to take a mass movement. So if that's one of the galvanizing issues, when I went to Democrats Abroad website, knowing I was coming here, that's a huge issue on that website. It's a huge issue in all of your minds. And you're experts because you have the personal stories. And I think that's really key. So why don't I actually stop there? Penny talked a little bit about our revolution, and anyone can join. And, I'm here as a guest to talk about both organizations. very easy to join both. So hopefully everybody is joining both. In Our Revolution, if you go to the website or you sign up with Penny is the best way, or ourrevolution.com. This is a meeting and you join and you're in. There's no dues. If you want to donate money at some point, great, but it's not really based on that. It's based on people getting active. And as I said before, the strategy that we believe works, and this would not be limited to Our Revolution, it's like a triangle, 3 sides, the basis issues. People want to talk about issues all across, voters in all 57 parties love to talk about the issues, again, local, state, or national issues. So the issues is like what drives us. And then the right side is of the triangle, think of it as candidates or ballot measures, elections. You get people as an action item, you move from the issue to candidates that are adhering to those issues, many of them, or getting candidates to run on those issues, or ballot measures that we can actually put on the ballot in many of the states. And the left side is party building, what you're doing in Democrats Abroad, what we're trying to do in Our Revolution, in this case together, but to get people involved. And in most cases, it's in the Democratic Party. Some people will say, there's way more independents. I live in, somebody said this to me, Eau Claire, Wisconsin. We're not going to be able to win as Democrats here. We're going to organize as independents. That's fine. But I'm just saying some version of political organizing, not just resistance, not just one issue at a time, not just for a candidate or a ballot measure, but building a political structure that's ongoing, that you don't start all over all the time. So think of that triangle. That's what I would advocate, and that's what we're trying to do in order to not just grumble, not just whine, not just be angry, which is almost every day, but to actually believe that that we can win. So with that, can we throw it open to questions?
So if you have questions, people watching this on the live stream, if you have questions, let me know, and I will be glad to ask the DNC Unity Commission co-chair.
Well, I don't know everybody's name.
It's okay, people can tell their name when you call
Okay,
them.
great. Jim.
Hi, I'm Jim. I have a question for you. I'm most interested to hear about efforts to unify and especially to reform the Democratic Party from
Yeah.
within. I must say that I'm sort of mildly encouraged by what I'm hearing, but I'm also discouraged by some news that I've read recently, and I don't pay as much attention as I should to the internal affairs of the Democratic Party, but I did see this news item just a few days ago, October 19th, from Vanity Fair. Somebody sent me this. DNC Committee Chairman Tom Perez has stripped a number of longtime party officials of their at-large delegate status or leadership positions while appointing a slate of 75 new members that include Clinton campaign veterans, lobbyists, and neophytes. And the article goes on to say that upon perusing his picks, Progressive Party members were incensed to find that he had demoted a number of veteran delegates who backed either Keith Ellison or Bernie himself in 2016. What's going on?
Yeah, so think of it this way. So first of all, what they would say, the people around Tom, I know Tom forever, he was the labor secretary, right? So I was the president of the labor union, so I know. Partly what that staff would say is, very few people got replaced, and yeah, we put people in who supported us. That's actually what they would say. So, and if people here followed that election, I was heavily involved with Keith Ellison. I was whipping the votes and counting them. And for party chair, we got 200. Tom Perez got 213 and a half. And then, which was a half a vote short. And then on the second ballot, a bunch of other votes came in. It was 235 to 200. There were other candidates who dropped out, basically. And so, he didn't replace that many people. I'll defend him on that basis. But yeah, virtually, I'd say 2 of the people that are new were, quote, supporters of Keith or Bernie, either one. And probably 10 or 12, because not that many were replaced. We're not. So that's the numbers on that. But the bigger issue would have been the Rules Committee, if we want to get into negatives. I hope we end this on positives, but if we want to get into negatives, the Rules Committee basically has no one on it from the Bernie or Keith Ellison. Keith Ellison himself might be on it, but nobody else. I'm not even sure he's on it. Yeah, I'm talking about from the, I'm just being technical here, from the Bernie side. Yeah, well, that's the critical, that's the other side. On the Bernie, Keith Ellison side, I don't think there's anyone on the Rules Committee. And so that's a huge criticism.
Do they have control over the budget or something?
No, that would be the Budget Committee. That's probably, so the Executive Committee is also overwhelmingly that side. And that would have been another criticism. You know, my more optimistic view is this. There's been, in many of the state parties, I'd say at least 10, there's a huge change in the leadership. And people who supported Keith or whatever, people that did support Bernie, are now leading the party in those states. So there is an opportunity to say to people, if we want to unify based on reform, we can do that. And frankly, those 75 and a few people on the executive won't matter that much if we can continue to create change and a sense of unity based on change, based on a positive vision in those 57 parties. That's why I stay active at this level. I believe that can happen, and that it is happening. I could rattle off the states. Yes,
Thank you. My name's Isla.
Isla, go ahead.
My question is, if Bernie Sanders and his supporters are so interested in unifying the Democratic Party, and this is genuinely just a question, why is Bernie Sanders not a Democrat?
So that came up at the resolutions
That's
committee.
That very much bothers me.
Yeah. Okay, well, if you want to feel better about it.
I probably won't.
No, I think you might, actually. So 3 delegates from California, ironically, put in a resolution, I know them, to say that Bernie and Angus King, who's independent from Maine, should register as Democrats. It didn't exactly say that, but that's the resolve clause. And so I went to the resolutions committee on that, obviously. I haven't been on the DNC for 12 years, ready to speak on that. And Terry Anderson, who's about to be elected the chair of the Vermont party, he'd be an example of what I'm talking about, he spoke on that resolution. And what he said is, number one, Bernie Sanders has done more to build the Democratic Party in Vermont than anyone else, registering people. We're doing great there, blah, blah, blah. I went into a whole thing. And number two, that they consider him a Democrat and an independent. And that they don't want him to change necessarily because they're getting votes from the Northeast Kingdom, other places. So they're getting the independents and they're getting the Democrats. And I had just been in Maine, Bangor, Maine, and spoken the week before. And the Democratic leader in the Senate, his name is Troy Jackson, he spoke at the same thing. And he said that during the Maine is a caucus state. It's one of the few caucus states that's in the East. Might be the only one in the East. He said that during the caucus, that Bernie's campaign had helped register over 2,000 new Democratic voters. And so, you know, I mean, if Bernie was here and you know, if you could pin him down on this, which is not easy, he would say that, you know, he is the head of outreach for the Senate Democratic Caucus. He agreed to do that. He's campaigned for more Democrats than anyone else. All 25 years that he's been in Congress, he's caucused with the Democrats. And that, you know, he comes from a tradition of independent voters, and he's going to always vote as a Democrat. That's what he does. So in Vermont, you don't register. They don't have that kind of registration. But when you go in on primary day, you take a ballot, and he always takes a Democratic ballot. So truthfully, it is splitting hairs to some extent. But I mean, I think you have to take people for their totality. I don't think he's going to change. I don't know enough about Angus King to know what he's going to do, but I doubt he'll change either. I do think that in the final analysis, honestly, it's not just because I know the guy forever and love him, but that would be part of the reason. But he has done more, in my opinion, to build the party than almost anybody else, and you know, particularly after the primaries were over. And I think we ought to give him credit for that. I understand why everybody might not agree with that.
You don't say that was voted down, the California guys lost.
Yeah, it was overwhelmingly voted down. I just broke the plastic cup. This is the reason why I don't sit on chairs. I've not broken the Louis chair, but I will now quickly gobble down this cup. The water in the cup. Yes?
I was just wondering, for Medicare for All, how difficult will it be to eliminate the insurance lobbyists?
Oh, it'll be really difficult.
Yeah, I think it would be.
Because now, let me just say that in Canada, I don't know France, but in Canada, there is supplemental insurance. So they're always going to be there, right, to some extent. And, you know, I would probably personally say supplemental is a good idea. But they're not going to like it. And they have a huge lobby force and a huge amount of money behind it. And they donate money to Democrats. Keep going here. You're giving them
money to our revolution.
No, our revolution gets no corporate money. None. Zero. And anything over $200, it's only individuals, their names are listed on the website. No corporate money in our revolution. None. I chair the board of our revolution, believe me. None. Yeah. But anyway, back to your thing. That's why it's going to take a huge popular movement.
Several years.
Yeah. Well, the 4 years is just the math. So in the election next year, there are 26 Democrats up for re-election. Some of them aren't running. The 26 Democratic seats. There are 7 Republican seats.
Yeah.
And even with these 2 that now aren't running, you know, the math is terrible to get to from 48 to 51. So it's not likely. So that's why it's going to be 4 years. And the House is also incumbents win. It's going to be very hard to flip the House. Could happen though. But to have all that happen, at the end of the day, you're still going to have Trump, you know, or Pence or somebody. It's not going to be from our side. And so you can't pass it before 2021. So we may as well say, okay, there's 4 years. That's not the only issue that matters. Lots of other issues, early childhood education, college for all, bunch of issues here that I would take off. And we put them together, we build a popular movement. Joan, did you have a question?
Oh, you said that Bernie has done a lot for the Democrats.
Yeah.
What have the Democrats done for Bernie?
Well, he was able to run as a Democrat, I would say, but I don't disagree with you.
Why should they do it? What's the Why should they?
Yeah.
Verifiable voting.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that, elaborate, Joan, you can elaborate on your question. It would be, he gets criticized all over the place, and he stays with them no matter what, right? And he will stay with them. He will not run as a third-party candidate. That's my strong opinion.
He's supposed to have the youth behind him.
Yeah.
How strong is that?
It's very strong. So within our revolution, I can tell you, the staff are virtually all young. I mean, I'm not, but I don't get paid. I'm the chair. And I don't need it. I'm fine, right? I pension. But no, I mean, the reason he excites young people, in my opinion, not just young people, I'm not young, is because he, my great-grandmother used to say, I'll watch your feet, not your mouth. And Bernie, it's his feet. It's what he does and where he walks. And people, you know, he can be grumpy and all kinds of other things, believe me. But he's very, very authentic, and he sticks to what he's done. He really doesn't change. You know, I mean, he should change in some ways, but he doesn't change in those ways. Yeah, go ahead.
It's an issue of verifiable and transparent voting on every level, including within the Democratic Party.
Yes, no, that's right. Well, you answered your own comment. That's what we should have, is transparent voting. We need transparent funding also, which we don't have. Disclosed bill, let alone Citizens United. Disclosed bill doesn't go anywhere.
But just the counting of the votes and
That's all another issue, yeah.
that's the issue I'm wondering about that I don't hear being addressed.
Well, I haven't said anything about it. There's a lot of people that work only on that issue. The idea that you need backups for electronic voting, there needs to be, you know, as there is here in France, I think, there's a paper backup when people vote.
But then the Democratic Party is taken on faith.
It's not even a pencil.
It's a trust. It's all trust.
Paper in an envelope with that shit.
Yeah,
It takes 5 minutes.
yeah,
There's no line.
yes.
Wonder-
Sorry, I don't know many names here. Go ahead. What's your name? Say it again.
Mora.
Mora. Hi, Mora.
What's being done to address the gerrymandering?
Oh, yeah.
Huge, in many states. I live in Florida. I don't live in Florida here, but I mean, I vote in Florida. Florida is notorious for
Right,
gerrymandering.
one of the worst.
Back like 4 or 5 times to the judge. Nothing happens.
Right. So gerrymandering. So there is a Supreme Court case that Kennedy could be the 5th vote, could go either way. The difference of this case is it's a math argument. In the past, it's been a sort of human rights argument, and there's probably some chance of winning that case. But, I mean, the only real way to change that is going to be, that's again, why do you need a popular movement that's massive in the United States? Not going to happen otherwise. The legal arguments have not worked. Again, I would be hopeful that Kennedy would vote the right way, but I don't want to have my life depend on what he does.
So you're saying state by state, it's gonna have to happen state by state?
Yeah, we used to have much better control of the state, so we need to use it
In
and
southern
focus on it.
states, that's not gonna happen. Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, all those places down there, which should be.
Yeah, so let's talk about Florida.
Democratic strongholds, not
One-
happening.
Florida could be flipped. Why is Florida not flipped? It's a voting rights issue. It's not just a gerrymandering issue.
Also,
So Florida has one of the worst voter suppression records in the country.
you're absolutely right.
And we could get into a lot of detail on it, but it's millions of people. I'm not talking about immigrants who have green cards that can't vote. That's 11 million people in America. Green cards and no path to citizenship. They have a path, but it's $1,000 and about 100 hours of work. And so lots of them don't take it. But put all that aside, in Florida, all kinds of other state laws are in the way about voting.
The big problem in Florida is, I can tell you, everything is a felony. Everything is a felony.
Right,
And
that's a
if
million.
you happen to be brown or black,
Yes,
chances are much higher that you're gonna be convicted of a felony and you're stripped of your voting rights permanently.
that's right.
And that's the end of that.
That's 1 million voters in Florida, just that.
More, it's more than a million voters. in
Okay,
Florida.
more than 1 million voters in Florida. 1 million would be a lot, so it's really a lot.
It's really a lot. It is.
Yeah.
Especially in urban areas.
Yeah.
We're talking about places like Miami, Tampa, even St. Petersburg, where I have a place, you know, it's an enormous problem. This is not just a problem of Florida, but it happens to exacerbate it.
Yeah.
In southern states, and you know, I don't see a lot of people stepping up to do anything about this.
The ACLU is working on it.
Yeah, well.
It's not just the ACLU. There's a whole democracy movement in the country.
Yeah.
Groups like Common Cause, but all kinds of other big groups have banded together, a thing called the Democracy Initiative. I've been involved in that too. And trying to say to people, you might be from an environmental group or a labor group, you're never going to pass this, or a healthcare reform, you're never going to get your stuff done that you care about if we don't deal with these democracy issues. Voters in, money out.
That's how to flip states, right there.
Yeah.
These are absolutely people who vote Democratic if they have the opportunity to vote, which they don't.
Yeah. Well, so as you know, the Voting Rights Act has been gutted by 2 Supreme Court decisions. And so there is a path. It's a really, really, really hard path if you go top down, but there also is a bottom up path. So we worked on the election of the new mayor of Birmingham, Alabama, who's amazing. Randall Woodfin, who won 2 Tuesdays ago, October 3rd. And, you know, biggest city in Alabama. It doesn't mean we're going to elect Doug Jones, but that's how you build.
Well, except he's surrounded by Alabama.
I get it. Doug Jones is the Democratic Senate candidate, December, first Tuesday in December. Jerry.
Thank you, Larry. Just one question and briefly, what's your sense and what, if you were hearing anything about 2020 and Bernie's thoughts?
Do I hear from Bernie on 2020? Is that what you want to know?
Do you hear anything that you think
Bernie?
is credible?
Wow. That's a tough question. So Bernie's running for the Senate next year. That's definite. I think Bernie intends to play a big role in 2020. I can't say for sure that he's going to run because he wouldn't like that, number one. But I think that he will be, you know, actively involved, either running or with somebody else campaigning from the very beginning. And that won't be in 2020. That'll be in, late 2018. That'll start. That's what I believe will happen. Yeah. Gentleman in the back who has stories on Medicare.
I do have stories on Medicare. I'm Bob. I'm with Democrats Program. I wanted to just sort of follow up on what you were saying over here in response to, I forgot your name.
Laura.
Next to Wendy. Laura next to Wendy. About if you can speak about what our revolution is doing as an organization to motivate, stimulate, and create opportunity on local level races.
Yeah.
You know, I think we need to, as a Democratic Party, revise our expectations for 2018 for reasons that you already hinted.
Yeah.
We're not going to win the Senate. We're not going to win back the House, but we do need to win back state houses and state legislatures.
Yeah.
So what is our revolution doing to promote those kinds of efforts at the local level?
Larry, before you answer that, I need to add that along with myself, Bob was the other Bernie Sanders delegate from Democrats Abroad globally to the DNC. in
Okay, great, Bob.
Philadelphia. And
Welcome.
people should know that.
Okay, thank
There
you.
were 6 of us.
Yeah.
Penny and I were 2.
Yep. So the main focus, so our revolution is based on groups, like this group. It's groups. So it started out being Bernie and who did he, work with in the campaign. And so last November, there were about 100 candidates. Most of them came from the campaign. So now it's not coming from the campaign. Now it's coming from the 500 groups. So anybody that they have to come through a group, candidates. That's why we're not involved in every election. We don't, we believe in what I call inclusive organizing. Lots of different groups, lots of tendencies. But our tendency is to work through groups. Candidates come either out of the group or they go to the group. They help build the group. So like Ben Jealous, who's running for governor of Maryland, was a key founder of our revolution. There's 21 groups in Maryland. And we went around and helped organize them. And some of that was because he was thinking of running for governor, but he'd been with Bernie in the campaign. And many of the people now are people who were not with Bernie in the campaign. We don't, we can't have that kind of testing. We got to go forward. I like to say the windshield of the car, not the rearview mirror. But yeah, I mean, it's all the time. Last week, Paul Feeney from Massachusetts. Who's here from Massachusetts? Okay, so Paul Feeney got elected in a special election to the state senate. Paul had been the Bernie director in Massachusetts and then in Rhode Island and Connecticut. He's a union electrician, actually technician, not electrician, works for Verizon. And he won the primary and then won the general election. And again, whether people were from the Bernie wing or not, Jim Roosevelt, the grandson of Franklin Roosevelt, who was not one of our folks, he was at the DNC, the co-chair of the Rules Committee. You should have, last week he was crowing about Paul Feeney, who's now in the state senate. And instead of a conservative Democrat, we have Paul Feeney. And so there's every week there's examples like that. And that's the stuff I'm proudest of because I actually don't believe we can just, wave a wand and all of a sudden, we're going to change the House of Representatives. I think it's a combination of municipal and state and building a movement and the movement getting strong enough at some point, and this is a little idealistic, that it can compensate for the TV advertising, which is what dominates so much. And even in Bernie's campaign, to be a little self-critical, $80 million was spent on TV. And it was a grassroots campaign. It didn't have corporate money or anything else close to it. But it's a reality, that kind of thing, to some extent. I don't like it personally. But the only way you're really going to undercut that is to have organizations like this, whether it's in Paris or whether it's in Peoria, that voters trust. And that not just voters trust, but that people are engaged in their communities. I like to say we put in 5 hours a month for something besides all the other things in your life to build some kind of political and issue-based organizing. And if we can convince millions of people to do that, I'm convinced things will change. So yes, we'll probably be involved with hundreds of local candidates. Probably 10 or 15 will be congressional candidates. There might be a few in the Senate, but most of those won't, number one, they have to ask for an endorsement. I don't see a lot of that in the Senate. But in the House, there'll be some of it, but a lot of it will be state and local. And my own opinion is that's great. These are us. This is people like us running and winning and showing that we can do that. And then changing, where we live. Who did I not call on yet? Okay, right there. Sorry, I forgot your name. I met you. Lionel?
Lionel, yes.
I got it right.
Yeah, there's a progressive group out there called the Justice Democrats.
Yeah.
And they seem to be putting people into primaries.
Yeah.
And they're judging them, of course, on not getting money from PACs, being from the
from the Young Turks.
Yeah, the Young Turks.
Thank,
what's your
thanks,
relationship? What's your relationship with them? Are you
often work with
supporting
them.
You often work.
Yeah, but we often work with almost everybody. But we don't start from a premise that our number one target would be incumbent Democrats who don't adhere to they start a little bit more from that premise.
Yeah, that there's a kind of test.
Yeah. So I would say to you, especially the Congress, most of the people that we would relate to, their main anger would be at Republicans. Where there's open Democratic seats, yeah, they want to see people run who have progressive values. But with few exceptions, they're not going to want to put a ton of energy into targeting the incumbent Democrat unless it's like really clear, something's really clear there. So I think it's fine, Justice Democrats. I could easily, wound up there, but I'm not. Because, I sort of start from the premise that we mainly have an organizing problem not as much as of an ideological problem. And that, for me anyway, I'd rather go organize around issues and get more people involved than sort of argue with the other people about, who's more progressive. But I don't mean to put that down in any way. I like Senk, and we have a lot of people with Young Turks Network, and that's where that's coming from.
It's important that people know about that.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I'm getting emails from them and I never asked for them. So I think because I get it, I've been with our revolution for.
We don't give away the list ever to anybody.
Oh, I don't know how.
Oh, well, there's one exception. If you donated money to a candidate,
Yes.
the candidate could have shared that list. They're not supposed to do that either, so I'm not sure how that happened.
We don't share your names in Paris with anyone.
Yeah.
It's guarded religiously.
No, I'm just learning about it.
Just so you know,
Right,
your name will not be sent to anyone.
Yeah, we don't share that list either. So I was trying to figure that out, but it can't be from the candidate. The candidate has a right to use, once you donate, the candidate will then email you, but they actually don't have a right to use the list with anybody else. Yes,
Axel Kraus.
hi Axel.
I get, I'm sort of asking this question on behalf of a lot of French journalists and colleagues who are always asking, and these are the two questions that always come up, and I'd be interested in hearing what you think about them, how you respond. The first is the issue of impeachment. Whether it can happen, might it happen, whether it's an issue, or is it simply going away, concerning Trump. The second question, which you touched on, which is, you said that it wouldn't take a constitutional amendment to change the electoral college system.
Yeah.
What would it take?
So here's how the National Popular Vote works. It's actually an organization, and the guy who started it actually started by one person named John Koza. He has a lot of money. He is a computer scientist who figured out the algorithms for state lotteries and started a business out of that. But he's very progressive, and always was, ironically. And so he's self-funding this thing called National Popular Vote. So you can go to the website. And so here's how it works. I don't know that you needed a PhD in computer science to do it, but it didn't hurt. So here's how it works. So if states that have the total number of states equaling 270, right? That's the number of electoral votes you need to win as president. If states that equal 270 votes say that our electors, so states combine their electors, that our electors in our states will be bound by the national popular vote, not our own vote, but only if states with 270 electoral votes have also done that. And so that has now passed in states that have, and I don't know all of them by memory, but states that have 170 electoral votes. That's the good news. The bad news is getting the next 100 is going to mean Republican states. There's not enough Democrat. There's one or two Democratic states. But California, New York, amazingly, New York did pass that. But in New York's case, it goes away in 2020 unless it's adopted by enough states by then. So we'll have to do it again. I don't know every state, but if you go to NPV, I think it is .org, or definitely Google National Popular Vote, you'll see a rundown of every state. And in my life as CWA president, but also this democracy initiative, we're part of that, and I actually think you'll see the Democratic Party support that, the whole part, meaning the DNC at some point in the next year. Yes?
Yes. If you're in Democrats abroad, why should you also be part of our revolution?
You could answer that question. Oh, thank you. I
I
won't
do
break
it
this
all
way.
the time, so I'm.
Connie brought me a water in a glass. I won't easily break it.
I'm gonna say one word
No,
about that.
I want Larry to answer that, but I have given you, yeah.
So, you already said it at the beginning. There's a bunch of things that are different. It is able to do global work, would be one thing. Number two, they're part and parcel of a movement for progressive change. So just like people are in more than one organization, there aren't any dues. You get to work with people. Who here is a member of our revolution? All right, so you get to work with all these great people, and you know, we're all working together, I would say, as much as we can.
Can I share a word?
Yes.
The night that Donald Trump won, I know, I hate to bring it back again, but I was in tears and I said, I want my party back.
Because this is not what the Democratic Party is. Look back into history and see what the kind of change the Democratic Party brought to our country, to our beliefs, all of the things that happened. Just go back, you have to go back a century. That can come back again. The Democratic Party is a great party. There are great people still in the Democratic Party. A lot of the Democrats who run in the party. I'm fighting for the party. And I think that our revolution is also fighting for the survival of our party. I mean, come on, we'll never have anything but a two-party system. No, it would be fine if we did. I'm not saying it wouldn't be fine. It would be great. But I want this party to become what it used to be, a progressive party for the people. And I agree with everything our revolution does. And I agree with all of the resistance groups. And I participate in all of the resistance movements. But that's because I want the party, the Democratic Party, to become that party again. There's room for everybody. Remember, it's a big tent, and I'm seeing that in the DNC, Larry.
Yeah,
You
well,
are
that's
too.
what we're fighting for.
I mean, even people like, did you mention Jim Roosevelt the other day?
I mentioned him.
A few minutes
Yeah.
ago. People like Jim Roosevelt who are old members of.
Franklin's grandson.
Oh, that's true, as a matter of fact. But the fact is, those people are still in there fighting, and I'm still in there fighting for the Democratic Party to become the great party that it was again. I vowed I would do that, and I'll do it.
Right, no, I want to concur with a lot of what Connie has said. You cannot wish, you cannot wish a third party into existence. And to look at, we have a two-party system of government. We do not have a parliamentary system of government. And for better or for worse, we want to bring the Democratic Party back to its roots, back to its values. And I believe that's what the entire Sanders movement, the entire Our Revolution is in the process of doing. So we share many of the same values, and I think we need to move
Yeah, and let me
forward.
just say that in many of the states, as well as this party, Democrats have brought us a party, right? That has happened, not in the majority of them, but in many of them. So in Washington State and Nebraska, it's the same people at this point. And so when people are joining one or the other, they're really working together. There's 10 states like that, Wyoming of all places. Yes.
I want to add to this, and I concur with both of you concurring. If those of us who also vote in France, I have dual nationality, see what happens when, there's a split of 4 or 5 different candidates on the left. Now, on the right, there generally isn't that many splitting because they all want, we know what they all want.
Hatred.
And I mean, why shouldn't there be? I feel that there are idealistic differences between truly progressive thinking and the present thinking in a lot of the Democratic Party. Certainly not all of them, and certainly not. No. But what I'm saying is coexistence and unity is really going to be the only way to get the number of votes that we need to get. So we have to. I'm not saying compromise. I'm not saying give up anything. I'm saying that if we can't live together, then we can't expect to win the Senate, the House, or anything else. It's a serious problem. You have to really think about it realistically.
Let me get the people that haven't. Yes,
Yes.
in the back.
Hi, my name's Jane, and
Hi, Jane.
I just wondered about the ex-offender
Yeah.
being struck from the rolls. I wonder how many there are. How if they could be, because I know in some states, if they're
Different
demand
state to state.
they can, and I wonder how much of a difference that could make.
It's a huge difference.
Yeah.
So even in Maryland, where we got that passed, we were hard working on that last year. It was 50,000. That's not $1 million like in Florida. You're saying it's more than $1 million. But still.
Everything's a felony.
Now in Maryland, it was getting rid of it was 5 years after you were off probation, you could vote. So get rid of the 5 years off probation. Now it's just off probation. But yeah, no, it's tens of millions of people got off the whole country.
So that seems like a really
The biggest single issue we have.
factor.
Yeah, so you have that. You have the green card issue of $1,000 So you think about, at least in my family, when people came in the 19th century, the ward leader in Philadelphia dragged them into vote immediately. They didn't have to speak English, nothing. Now, $1,000 and more than 100 hours of your own time. So most of them don't do it. Those people would be voting with us overwhelmingly, 90%. That's deliberate. These are not flukes. These are deliberate things.
Is this growing now? Is this growing?
Yeah.
It's all moving.
Yeah, the percentage of residents in the U.S. that vote is all-time low.
No, but I mean, is there, to get the felony?
Oh, the movement to change it? Yeah, the NAACP is leading that. National Association of
And how
Advancement
many
of Colored People.
states have changed already?
Virginia changed partially, Maryland changed, a bunch have changed, but partially.
California, is California in
I
there?
think California's okay, but I'm not sure. I'm sure at the NAACP website, there should be a list. If not, we'll look somewhere else for you. Let me just go to the ones who haven't asked the question yet. I forget, did you ask a question or?
No, I didn't.
Okay, you're up.
I'm Annie,
Hi, Annie.
and I'm a dual citizen of French and American. In Florida, I wanted to say there's through the DNC, there's actually an office where people who come out of prison get some help for the rights to be restored.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I volunteer.
That's great. That's what you vote there also?
I used to live in Florida.
So you two should get together.
I lived in Florida.
Anybody else who didn't? Yeah, why don't you?
Yeah, hi.
Hi.
You mentioned the NAACP. I was wondering to what extent our revolution has been able to engage with African-American organizations in the community, that community, because one of the many things that was frustrating about the last election cycle was that if the African-American community had turned out anywhere near the turnout that they had shown for Obama, we would be talking about President Clinton today. So how do we engage that important constituency, and what is Bernie's group and your group doing in that group?
Yeah, so the NAACP itself is not political.
No, right, no, but I mean
But this thing, Democracy Initiative, NAACP is a key leader in it. Our Revolution is a key leader. Lots of groups. So on these democracy issues, huge joint work. Our Revolution, so I'm the chair. I'm the quote volunteer. The president, who's full time, is Nia Turner. She's a key African American leader from Ohio. So she's running the organization day to day. And Bernie would be here. He'd say, Larry, don't get into identity politics, because he doesn't like that. But it's more a matter of how do you build inclusive sort of political movement, not sort of say, okay, we have one from here and one from there and 20 from here and 6 from here. And I think that's an issue. And so part of the reason to engage in places like Atlanta, Georgia, Jackson, Mississippi, Birmingham, Alabama.
Where we've won.
Yes, where we've won, is deliberate, to be blunt. Philadelphia, where I grew up, the DA race, that candidate's white, but he was focused on mass incarceration. I grew up, we had literally a racist, I would call him fascist, police commissioner named Frank Rizzo. And by the way, when people say change the Democratic Party, that was the Democratic Party I grew up in. So it's not just Philadelphia, Mississippi. That was Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And he went on to be mayor as a Democrat for 2 terms. But the point being that I think the key is that to take on those issues in a way where we all take them on, and whether it's Medicare for all, into communities of color, and talk about what happens on healthcare, or college for all. That when I grew up, Philadelphia Community College had no tuition. I went to Rutgers. There was almost no tuition there. There was tuition. It was a few $100s a year. These are issues that affect us all. But I think we have to be more intentional about it. We have to be, Bernie got, sort of labeled as, this notion of Bernie bros is somewhat derogatory, white guys for Bernie. And it really did not reflect the people I worked with at all. But, I think that in terms of our voters, we have to be intentional about that, or it goes the wrong way. And so, again, he would probably somewhat disagree with that, but you're asking me, not him. So, I think we have to intentionally build a broad-based movement, women, men, young, seniors, but all of us, black, brown, and white, as I like to say. Yes?
So when you say broad-based movement, I'm hearing, I heard a couple of people talk about, coming back to the core of the Democratic Party. And I know this is kind of taboo for me to say, being at a political party, Democratic event. But when you're trying to build a popular movement with our revolution, don't you want to focus more on issue-driven things and rather than state we're Democrats doing this? So I'm wondering, like, do you support any Republican candidates or other candidates that are more broad that maybe, because I know in local elections, you say you work a lot with local elections, I know that those candidates are not necessarily voting strictly along party lines, and they might have, ideals about climate change or healthcare that, their counterparts in the Senate might not have. And so would our revolution support those kind of candidates that are broad-based and future-looking, but also coming from both parties and coming from an ideology rather than
issue-driven candidates. So there are places, I know some of them where people who were not party identified, went to an Our Revolution group, got supported and won, and others where they lost. But Richmond, California would be a big one, called the Richmond Progressive Alliance. That's an affiliated group. So I was generalizing. I'd say 90% of the people involved are trying to, are involved as people who are also changing or working in the Democratic Party where they live. But what you said is absolutely right. Plenty of independents who don't want to do that. I mentioned the group in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, who said, hey, practically speaking, we won't win that way. We're going to work as independents. On the West Coast, well, definitely in Washington and California, the primaries are open primaries in the sense of, if somebody gets 50% in that election, they're elected. If they don't, the top two run. And so it leads more to less party identification. And so lots of people work within that kind of a framework. But just being, direct about it, I'd say most of the people subscribe to the idea that you heard a bunch of people here talk about, that if we're going to talk about national change beyond local, we're going to have to talk about getting involved and building a progressive, popular Democratic Party. But the party is secondary from my point of view, not as a party, but if we don't have a message, if we're not building a popular movement based on issues, we won't be able to build the party. I think you have to do both. I don't need to say secondary, but you have to do both, or you won't build the party, even if that's the only thing you care about. Because you're not going to get millions of people involved just because I grew up in a house everybody was a Democrat, so it wasn't a big deal to me. But you're not going to build a mass popular movement in America of tens of millions of people just around let's join the Democratic Party. I mean, I've said this to Tom Perez as well. You got to have a clear message of what we're fighting for. Things like health care and college for all and mass incarceration, decent immigration. That's going to unite people, and people look around and say, hey, I do believe in those things, and there should be 50 million of us, and if we spend a few hours a month, we can change this. So I basically agree with you, but again, I want to just be honest and transparent. Most of the people that are involved in our revolution are involved thinking that part of what we're going to do is also help build a bigger Democratic Party that's progressive.
Right.
Who didn't have to say anything yet? Yes.
Can I just ask?
And then we'll go back to the others if we have time.
Following that, is the Democratic Party becoming more progressive? I heard there was a lot of infighting and they weren't getting anywhere.
Right.
Are they moving out towards a much more, the whole Democratic Party?
No, not the whole Democratic Party. But if you look at your party, definitely does that, in my opinion. Democrats abroad. But I started to rattle off the states. So in a number of states, they may all be west of the Mississippi. I have to check myself on that. But the whole party structure has changed. And it's people who, it's much more of a mix of people and so-called people who come from either our revolution or other popular organizations are now chairing the party. So that would be Washington, be the vice chair in Oregon, be the vice chair in California, would be Wyoming, Nevada,
and Washington.
Wisconsin,
Yeah,
Washington, Colorado, Morgan Carroll, yeah.
Well, that's
Fair to
good.
call them socialists?
Nebraska. I don't know what they would call themselves. Some use that term, some don't, but yeah, some version of. I mean, not that many are going to say, yes, I'm a socialist. When Bernie says he's a socialist, what that means is he's for college for all, he's for Medicare. He's not saying, we're going to nationalize Exxon.
Right, it means people get afraid.
So,
No, they don't.
Oh, yes, they
No,
do.
I mean, I don't have a problem with it, I'm just saying, yes.
They used to.
Okay, Roxanne has the floor.
Okay, thanks, Gary.
Sorry.
You mentioned, only 26% of the population voted in Texas.
Yeah.
Growing demographics in the United States, Latinos are a growing demographic. Texas in 2020 will be majority Latino. When, I go to Texas and talk to people, they say, we never see the Democrats, we never see,
Right.
local, people come to us except during, election time. How do you see the Democratic Party becoming more relevant to Latinos in Texas?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. Not an expert on it. I would say, I mean, what we're trying to do, Hightower and the Our Revolution Group, they have 11 regional groups. They have groups within those. They're getting people to be precinct captains across, from the Red River Valley to Tyler. Nina Turner and Jim Hightower just did a tour of a bunch of those groups last weekend, so it's pretty dramatic, right? Nina Turner, strong black woman from Ohio, and Jim Hightower, sort of, populous Texas in a certain way. And, so it's person by person, getting people to be active, getting people to join, getting people to be precinct chairs, and being intentional that they're in the Valley doing it, not just in Austin. In fact, less so in Austin, but in Tyler and Red River Valley, the Brownsville, and trying to build in that way, not in a flashy way, because there's been a lot of people that come in and said, oh, now we're gonna register people, we're changing Texas.
Didn't work.
It didn't do anything, right? I shouldn't say it didn't do anything, it didn't do enough. I think you have to dig in, town by town. How many counties are there in Texas? 200 something? And think about, how many of those counties can we build real organization? And I don't say it's easy. He's very inspired, and he's like 72 years old and fired up, and he's like totally into this. And more importantly, many of the people doing it are black, brown, and white from rural and as well as urban, and they're young. And so, I'm hopeful. I don't think it's easy, right? You got huge amounts of money and powerful interest in Texas, like it the way it is now. Yeah. That's Hightower talks like that. Your first name's the same, right? You're Jim, right?
He spoke here, he came to France.
Did he?
It was great. It was long before, I must have been about 8 or 10 years.
Yeah, he's terrific.
As a
Great
matter of
friend
fact,
of
he
mine.
stayed here.
Yeah.
So if you want to follow Hightower, he has a publication called The Lowdown,
Yeah,
and it's a website.
It's fabulous.
Yes, brother.
You
We'll start now with second rounds.
Second round. You mentioned Bernie Bros earlier.
Yeah.
When they first sort of appeared as a phenomenon, I thought they might be a sort of either GOP dirty trick or maybe a Russian affair, who knows? But they stuck around, and they're still around, and they were kind of hard to control at the convention. And we're talking about an extreme left of the far left, right? It's a small group of people, but they're vocal and they're agitated, and they're agitators. And they sometimes seem to be using this rhetoric of purity tests for potential Democratic candidates going forward.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, does our revolution have a plan to address that kind of, I don't want to call it an extremism because it's a passion, really, but that kind of demand, that kind of exigency on the far left for this kind of purity, which could, we would all like to have our ideal candidate, but that person, she doesn't exist, right?
Yeah.
But do you think that could be an issue going forward? Is there a plan to deal with that potential problem going forward?
Yeah, so it's hard to deal with.
If I can get both in there. Dianne Feinstein or Kevin DeLeon?
There you go. Is that two different questions, or that's the same thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we don't have a great way to deal with it, honestly. Part of the way we deal with it is not trying to deal with it, but as a result of being group-centric, it's not about individuals and talking. It's about building groups, getting more people to be in the group, and then the group doing those three things: party building, candidates, ballot measures, and issues. I should have started with issues, right? And so if people had their own group and they were like the way what you just described, you know, there's not really, they would be limited to speaking for the number of people they had in their group. They couldn't speak for our revolution. That's the only way we can do anything about that. And we do that. So people can speak for their own group. There are states where the groups are knitted together and then they actually do deal with it. So Matt, there's 5 states at this point that have organized all the groups within their states. We help them. We don't do that for them. We couldn't. So it's Massachusetts, Texas is one of them, Wisconsin, Maryland, and Illinois. And there's more now that are doing that, partially because of what you talked about. So on the one hand, obviously we believe in expression and don't want to restrict it. But on the other hand, you don't want 2 or 3 people speaking for, 200,000 people. Kevin DeLeon, so we have like 50 groups in California for a statewide thing. They would have to either unite or we would have to do polling, and that's a long way off to that race. I don't know what will happen. Again, being blunt, I'd like to be honest. I don't see.
All right, so you've been watching the live conversation there with the speech with the DNC co-chair, Larry Cohen.
Harry can use them. And I don't see our folks using them for her. She wouldn't want them anyway, probably. Honestly. So, I don't know. Did that answer the question, sort of? Yeah.
So
We're not an endorsement machine. There are other groups, Justice Democrats, lots of others. They're going to take on every race. They have some top-down structure. I don't even get in there.
thank you very much for joining. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button down here. Tap the bell so you can be notified of future broadcasts. We're here listening to the DNC Unity co-chair, Larry Cohen, as the DNC party tries to reform and unite its various divisions. Thank you, Ali. Thank you all for coming here. Of course, I couldn't talk during the speech itself, but I will be meeting and talking with Larry later today. So if you have questions, I saw some of your questions earlier. I will ask him privately, and I have some questions of my own that I'm interested in getting the answers to. Yeah, thank you, Olga. That was pretty interesting to hear. Yeah, the whole thing will be available on replay. Again, if you're not a subscriber, don't forget to hit the subscribe button down in the lower right-hand corner there, and tap the bell so you can get notified. Thanks for the likes. If you like this type of video, don't forget to hit that like button. And thanks for all the comments and just for being here. And we'll do some more political scopes as well as other news events in Paris. This was an exclusive that we had here tonight. So thank you guys so much. Talk to you guys soon. Bye.